Just going through the structure of what I'm going to say today. Very simply, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Cefas, who we are, what we do, and where we do it. Hopefully, bring over the scope of the work that we do. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my path, how I became a government scientist. And as part of that, I'll then neatly segue into the research that I've done, mainly in my time at Cefas, and what the day job entails, which I hope may inspire you, may horrify you, but anyway, we'll see. And I'll then just conclude with some summary and reflection. So getting stuck in straight away then, who we are. So we're basically the government's marine and freshwater science experts. We provide science and evidence, and we're there really to help keep our seas, oceans, and rivers healthy and productive. And we have a mandate to keep the food that we produce from the sea safe and sustainable. Slightly random slide here about the history of Cefas, put together by our comms people. The important point here is that we originate 118 years ago. Now, the interesting thing is that Cefas were originally established in Lowestoft in 1902 as an outpost of the Marine Biological Society of the British Isles. And the reason that we were established in Lowestoft was because at the time, there was serious concern that the North Sea plaice stock, the main exploited stock at the time, was being seriously overexploited. So we have this notion that overexploitation of fish stocks is a modern concept, but in fact, really we were established to start tagging plaice and look at their population dynamics. Now, the focus of Lowestoft work has changed over 118 years. You know, we've taken in environmental work, matching the rise of nuclear power in this country, looking at nuclear discharges, effects on the environment. We used to be active in the Arctic up until the 50s with our research vessel Ernest Holt. And it wasn't really until 1997 that we actually became a government agency. And what that means is that Cefas is owned by DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Fisheries and Rural Affairs. But we have autonomy in the way that we operate. And to this day, DEFRA still provides a large part of our budget, but increasingly we get budget from other parts of government and also from commercial fee-paying customers. But what we do remains the same. We provide impartial data and evidence. 2019 was also a very significant year for us. And for those of you who've been to the lab in Lowestoft, you'll know that as we were demolishing our old premises in the Grand Hotel, we built ourselves a big new shiny box. And how were we to know then that in fact this lovely new open plan environment was very conducive to spreading disease? So no sooner have we moved into our new headquarters than we swiftly had to move out again. And we've all been working at home pretty much ever since, like everybody else. Now, our future rests in our staff. And I'd have to say the biggest pleasure at working in Cefas is working with the most amazing colleagues. They're not all amazing, I'd have to say, but the majority of them are, and are very inspiring people to work with. Now, at present, Cefas overall have something like 650 staff, based primarily at the Lowestoft site, where we focus on fisheries and environment. We've got another 150 staff or so based down in Weymouth, where the emphasis is food security. But we also man small port offices throughout the country where our fisheries observers are based. So we've got offices in ports in Scarborough, Hale and Plymouth. Then the jewel in our crown, of course, is our purpose-built research vessel, the 70-metre Cefas RV Endeavour, which maybe some of you have even been on, I don't know. It's a beautiful thing, very inspiring, and Endeavour is equipped to support a whole range of survey and monitoring activities. It's out pretty much 320 days per year or more. I don't know what the current figure is, but Endeavour is pretty much always in action, although again, the someone's trying to call me. Yeah, COVID has presented challenges as to how we've been able to put people on and off Endeavour, and that currently involves quarantining people in a hotel before they board the ship. However, our survey programme is currently ongoing. Sorry, the slides are very slow to change. Okay, so next, what we do. Now, it's incredibly difficult to describe the full reach of activity that Cefas address. And it's really only at this stage in my career, I think, that I've got a full appreciation of the scope of the work that we do. However, some clever person in our comms department tried to summarize it within this, this figure. The important thing here is that the bulk of what we can do can be brigaded under three main areas of societal impact. Those are enabling food security, safeguarding human health, and then the third one, supporting marine economies. I think we've actually changed that. Some of us had issues around the supporting marine economies because the essential word missing here is sustainability. So really it's supporting a sustainable and healthy marine environment. So just look, I'm going to talk you around the areas of activity that we're active in. So let's start with clean seas. So we've got an eco-toxicology team in Lowestoft, and we also have people in Weymouth interested in water quality. And together, there's a lot of ongoing work around water quality, nasties and seawater, etc. Ocean processes, we have a large body of modelers in Lowestoft, many of whom are oceanographic modelers. And they do a lot of work predicting how the oceans work, how they're impacted by climate change, trying to predict the impacts of human activities in the marine environment. Lots of people working on ecosystem understanding, why ecosystems vary, the drivers of that variability, and trying to predict impact. Now, a large part of that's marine biodiversity, understanding biodiversity, knowing the steps that we have to take to protect that biodiversity. And in recent years, a very fast growing part of our work is in valuing nature. And in fact, a couple of our economists are embedded in the Central DEFRA team, who are currently working on a £20 million programme of valuing nature. So this is a big part of what we do currently, natural capital and evaluation of nature in the marine environment. Climate change, of course, is embedded pretty much in everything that we do, and we have a long history of this. Cefas hosts the International Marine Climate Change Centre, coordinating activities around climate change research within the marine environment. And the IMC3 produce a periodic report card, which is really for those communities who are most directly impacted by marine climate change. We have statutory duties for emergency response. So pretty much any major maritime incident in UK waters usually has some sort of Cefas involvement. And that's whether it's an oil spill or whether cargo's lost. Even, and slightly gruesomely, when people are lost overboard, it's often Cefas modelers who are called upon to try and predict where the body might wash up or be found. But a more recent example of where we've been involved was the Wakashio oil spill in Mauritius, where it was in fact two Cefas colleagues were given dispensation to fly out socially distanced circumstances, but to aid the Mauritius government in trying to minimize a really potentially seriously damaging oil spill and to put together a program of mitigation for the future. Aquatic animal health, this is a big part of the work that we do down in Weymouth, looking particularly at diseases in crustaceans and other pathogens that may affect aquaculture species, a lot of work going on currently in Southeast Asia. Assessment and advice obviously is core to what Cefas does, and I guess the two main areas are in fisheries and in, well, currently in offshore marine renewable energy. Fisheries, of course, as I've already said, has been core to Cefas since the outset, but remains equally important to Cefas today. And you'll have seen recently the publication of the Fisheries Bill in Parliament a couple of weeks ago. Cefas scientists very deeply involved in that and in planning for the UK becoming an independent island nation and regulating our fisheries thereafter. Food safety is another big component of the Weymouth activity, and in fact we've got an International Centre of Excellence sponsored by the OIE in Weymouth, which looks after shellfish sanitation. And finally, on the wheel, we've got technology and data. So obviously technology and data are both big parts of what we do. We've actually got a technology team which can build bits of kit for us, as well as looking after things like our glider Lyra, shown in the picture here. And obviously we're a data-driven organization. So we have a data team that tries to keep our data operations of a standard required of an international organization. And I would say anybody interested in the data that we collect, go and have a look at the Cefas website, where we have the Cefas Data Hub, and you can interact with that, look at what data are available and are freely downloadable to the public. So maybe of further interest to many on this call today. Right, so where we work. So this is another area where Cefas has changed very rapidly in the last 5 years, where we've gone from being a government-facing organisation with responsibility in national waters, working with European colleagues, to becoming a truly international organisation, literally working now in every continent, including Antarctica, where we're involved in Southern Ocean fisheries assessments. We have a large role to play in CAMLAR, but a lot of our international work comes in from government funding on big international projects. And I'll just quickly touch on 5 of these: the Darwin Plus, the CLIP, the UK GMAP, CME, and Blue Belt initiatives. So just quickly talking about Blue Belt, this is all about enhancing marine protection across 4 million square kilometres of marine environment across UK overseas territories, with Cefas scientists being engaged in a range of Southern Ocean overseas territories. But probably our longest running overseas engagement has been with the Gulf countries, with the UK Gulf Marine Environment Partnership Programme. Now, this is about addressing challenges of marine environmental management in the Gulf, including climate change, antibiotic resistance, marine conservation, and developing blue economies. And in fact, until recently, in fact, we probably still have a couple of people embedded in Kuwait. But a lot of the work that we do in these countries is about using our expertise to teach in-country practitioners to deliver solutions in country. Very much the same in the Commonwealth Marine Economies programme. Again, this is about supporting small island developing states to develop their marine economies in a sustainable, resilient and integrated way. And the work that Cefas have been involved in is focused around the Caribbean and Pacific Ocean. Then Commonwealth Litter Programme. So this has been a huge programme. All of these programs are delivered in partnership. This one in particular led by Cefas. I think something like £4 million over a couple of years, supporting developing countries across the Commonwealth to take action on plastics entering the oceans. So the Cefas effort has centred on Belize, South Africa, and Vanuatu. This has been particularly challenging during the crisis in that we've had to deliver the most recent part of CLIP entirely remotely. But I guess there are parallels here with delivering teaching online, in that it's a case of teaching, again, the experts in country so that they're able to take action on their own plastic problems and to develop their forward-looking plans on plastic management. Then finally, we have the Darwin Plus projects. And again, Darwin Plus very much focused on working with local groups, allowing them to deliver long-term strategic outcomes for the natural environment around the world. And again, activity from Cefas in the Caribbean and also in the Philippines. Now, all of these programs, they're delivered in partnership, and Cefas does have a big focus on partnering and collaborative working. I just pulled this off Web of Science yesterday morning, and I think it's our top 15 collaborators by published output or something like that. I'm pleased to say that Essex did appear in this list. I think it was number 21, but it was equal times 35 or something like that, 21, but you're on here, so that's a good thing, and hopefully growing as well. But you'll see there's a predominantly European feel to the current collaborators, but that reflects the fact that all of this international activity that we're promoting is relatively recent. So it's really only the past couple of years that we're starting to develop serious relationships with some of our international university collaborators. We do, however, have two particular relationships that we invest in nationally. Our strategic alliances with the University of Exeter and the University of East Anglia. Now, these geographically are sensible universities to work with, but we've been working with both for a very long time. UA in particular, we've been working with for something like 50, 55 years. And the importance of these strategic alliances we cemented fairly recently in the last 5 years by turning the strategic alliance into centres. So at the University of Exeter, we now have the Sustainable Aquaculture Futures Centre, focused on animal and human health and seafood safety. And then at the UEA, where we have a shared lectureship, we have the Collaborative Centre for Sustainable Use of the Seas. And the benefits of these centres are that they allow Cefas scientists to participate in academia. They allow us to extend our outreach by working with academics. It gives us access to additional funding, allows us to collaborate on students, develop new projects. And for the university, obviously, there's the benefit of working with a policy-focused organisation. So that there's value there from the impact agenda. So those are very valuable partners. And it's worth mentioning at this stage that we take on a large number of students. I don't want to give the impression that I do everything at Cefas, but I am responsible for our Cefas student program. So at any one time, we have Cefas supervisors as co-supervisors on 80 studentships. And you'll see that the bulk of those are focused on our strategic alliance universities, Exeter and East Anglia. But in total, our students are based at 25 or more national and international universities. So, you know, for Cefas, that's a huge academic network that we can, that our supervisors can buy into and try and extend our influence and develop new relationships with. The value of PhD students, I hardly need to mention. It brings vibrancy into Cefas. It allows the students exposure again to the science policy interface. It brings us new skills and talent. We do try and employ something like 10 to 20% of our students when they complete. And you know, there's a benefit also to the Cefas supervisors in that it gives them that academic link and allows them to buy into fields of activity that would otherwise be excluded to them. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of just the range of activity that Cefas undertake, the type of work that we do, and the types of societal impact that we are capable of achieving. So at that stage in the talk, I'll now switch to tell you a little bit about how I ended up as a civil servant, effectively, at Cefas. So my own path, I started off as a zoology graduate at the University of Aberdeen, and I think, like the majority of my my colleagues at the time, I had some vague notion that when I finished, I would go and work in conservation. But I think my motivation at this time was probably to avoid getting a proper job for as long as humanly possible. And I was really lucky to find the most blue skies and non-applied possible PhD with sadly now deceased great Professor Roger Hughes at the University of Bangor. And my PhD was focused on bryozoans. So for those of you who don't know what a bryozoan is, it's a moss animal. They're small colonial organisms. You can see them in the intertidal zone, either as fronds or forming membranes on seaweeds. Now, my bryozoan is called Celeparella hyalina, a fascinating organism which the basic building block of a bryozoan colony is a unit called a zooid. And Celeparella is interesting in that it is separate male, female, and feeding zooids. So basically what my PhD consisted of was learning how to culture these animals in a laboratory situation, chop them up so that I had genetically identical colonies and expose them to mini microcosms and look at the factors that were driving maleness, femaleness, or feeding versus sexual allocation. Great fun, and 4 years where you're in complete control of every single aspect of the project design, data gathering, analysis, and output. And I got to the end of that, still not really clear on where my path might lie. And I was thinking about a career in academia, and it's very clear to me from my work in the Natural Environment Research Council and Training Advisory Board that many PhD students think they're going to go into an academic career, something like 80%, whereas in fact the opportunities available can only account for something like 20% of our PhD students. So when an opportunity came up at the Countryside Council for Wales on marine survey data around the Welsh marine coast, that sounded like a good opportunity. So I interviewed for that and I got the post. Now, my time at Countryside Council for Wales was fairly brief. Some amazing people working there with total dedication to conservation. However, I found that the daily input of survey data, which other people had gathered, albeit with a knowledge of what the data meant, I found it mind-blowingly tedious. And I have to say, when a postdoctoral opportunity came up in the School of Ocean Sciences at Menai Bridge arrived, I was very fortunate to get that. And after 6 months at CCW, I effectively ran screaming through the doors back into research, and that was a nice place to be. So I spent a very nice year working in Menai Bridge, following shore crabs up and down the intertidal zone, understanding the rhythms that drove their migrations. And towards the end of that, I had to start thinking about the next phase. And again, serendipity intervened. And I found myself in the very happy position of being offered the same job, offered 2 jobs on the same day. The first of those turned out to be my first encounter with Cefas, or at the time, the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. And the project was working on the European spiny lobster, Palinurus elephas, fisheries biology of spiny lobsters, which was an amazing project, spending 2 weeks of every year down in Cornwall, going out with fishers, sampling spiny lobsters, intercepting fishing vessels, going to merchants, purchasing specimens, taking them back to Swansea, and then the other 2 weeks in the month would be spent in the lab or driving up to West Wales to do exactly the same thing with the Welsh fishers. West Wales and Cornwall being the areas where you will find spiny lobsters. So this was an amazing project I really wanted to do. And I rather cheekily asked Professor Fusatani in Japan if I could come and work with his project once this spiny lobster thing was completed. And much to my surprise, he said yes. Yes, Dr. Hunter, you come at your earliest convenience. So, and sorry, one of the points of telling you all of this is the importance of networks in developing your career, in that if there are people that you really, really want to work with, get in touch with them, because one way or another, it's important to establish links. Very difficult in this day and age, I think, given the variety of media available, that you have to get people's attention. But if there's an expert whose work really influences you, inspires you, get in touch with them, talk about some opportunities, because it does open doors. Personally, I find flattery always helps. So postdoc number 3, I'd gone back to working in bryozoa, this time on the behavior of larvae. So I had 2.5 amazing, slightly bizarre years in Japan, which I'd love to tell you more about, but I don't really have time now. But again, the importance of the network. When you're working abroad as a postdoc, it can be isolating, and I know lots of people will have experience of that here. Use the network, because you're going to need to, well, if you're planning on coming back to your home country, you will need to use that network to find employment. Happily, again, I landed at the University of East Anglia in Norwich. So my 4th postdoc was kind of my segue into Cefas, in that I'd been taken on to manage a large EU program looking at the migration, behavior, and spatial dynamics of the European plaice and sole in the North Sea and surrounding areas. So I had 4 very nice years at that stage, where I had an office both at UEA and down at Cefas. I actually wrote my job description for Cefas, and in 2001 got taken onto payroll there. And I've been there ever since, so that's nearly 20 years, oh dear. So at this stage, I'll just tell you about the research that I've been doing at Cefas. Again, with the point that although you're going to work for a government agency, that doesn't mean the end to your research career. And I'd say that I've been publishing my work ever since I started at Cefas. And in fact, some of the work that I'm most proud of, I've done while I've been there. So when I arrived in Norwich, I basically became part of the fish behaviour team at Cefas, which was a really amazing opportunity, in that the behaviour team really was a bunch of world-leading individuals in the field of fish behaviour. And really, it was Cefas that pioneered the use of electronic data storage tags, or archival tags that they're sometimes called, and putting them on fish to record their behaviour. Anybody who's interested in reading a bit more about this, we produced, myself, Julian Metcalf, and Dave Wrighton have produced a sort of glossy, accessible account of electronic tagging for fish, which if you Google fish and chips, DEFRA and Cefas, should still be available on the web. But it was also the opportunity to work with some really inspiring people. So my old boss, Julian Metcalf, who has since retired and is having a very nice time in the south of France currently. His boss, Jeff Arnold, one of the founding fathers, if you like, of fish migration research. Dave Wrighton, who some of you may be familiar with, I still work with Dave just now. So it was a great bunch of very committed people, all feeling our way to describing the migrations of marine fish in their natural environment. So when I started at Cefas, we were still feeling our way a bit, but Julian had already discovered from the very first releases of electronic tags, which happened to be on plaice in the North Sea, that bottom-dwelling fish like plaice and cod periodically spend time sitting on the seabed. So what you have here is a plot. So it's the depth recorded by the electronic tag. You can see periods where the fish rests on the seabed, interspersed with periods of midwater swimming activity. Now, For those of you who work with fish, you will know it's incredibly difficult to observe the behavior of these animals in their natural environment. So you use data loggers because that records data remotely, but somehow you need to be able to use those data to reconstruct the true movements of those fish. So when a place record sits on the seabed, we're able to record the time of high water and the tidal range. And as it happens, both of those parameters can be used as a bi-coordinate system for geolocation to estimate the position of the fish and the degree of accuracy around that. And the degree of accuracy basically depends on the rate of change of the tidal parameters in any one area. Happily, in the southern North Sea, these tend to change rather rapidly, so we can get pretty accurate estimates of where our fish are located. So I embarked on a large program of tagging, and in fact, between the time that I started in '97 and 2005, we had tagged something like 1,300 plaice. And I just want to quickly show you this animation, which remarkably is going to play first go, so that's nice. So what you're looking at is the cumulative reconstructed tracks of something like 215 of our returned fish. And so each dot represents a single individual. You'll see pulses where individual releases of tags took place. And there's a shadow leaving a trace where the fish were located. And the reason that I'm showing you that is that those fish are not evenly distributed around the North Sea. They visit specific areas. Some of the fish migrate between different groups. And here I've overlaid certain, I think these are wind farm sites or proposed sites, so that these data are always applicable one way or the other, now more so than ever with the rapid upscaling of offshore marine renewable energy. And for those of you who are interested in this kind of thing, there's a recent paper by Serena Wright, myself and others in the ICES Journal of Marine Science, which looks at the interaction of fish based on the results of all of our tagging programs around man-made structures in the North Sea. Now, as I say, when I started, this was all quite groundbreaking territory. I'm happy to say that electronic tags are now a routine part of fisheries science in general. They're a routinely deployed tool. We've worked on a huge number of species. Myself, I've been involved in work primarily on plaice in the earlier years. I've later worked on thornback rays. I spent a couple of years tagging edible crabs. So most recently, I've recently completed a project looking at conservation biology of the European sea bass. And I was hoping to show you my sea bass results today. And if you ask me nicely, I'll show you them another time, but I don't really have time to go down that route at the moment. So just building on the results that I've just shown you of the plaice movements, basically our work following individual fish has been able to demonstrate population substructuring. We're able to determine the timing of the movements of those fish, so the time that they span where and when they're on feeding grounds. We can determine the time of their migrations to spawning areas, which are the grey blobs on this chart. We're able to look at how these fish interact with the tidal currents to minimize the energetic costs of migration. And we're also able to look at the vertical activity of those fish. So the plot here on the right-hand side was another paper looking at the midwater movements of the fish, identifying that the fish use the vertical environment differently. And when we can understand the timing and the extent of time that the fish spend in midwater, we can also understand their vulnerability to fishing. Then finally, on the broadest geographical scale, looking at the movements of the individual fish, we're able to model those and look at the effectiveness of spatial management, which is based on ICES system. I haven't got time to go into the details of that, but again, the bottom line here is that these data are hugely relevant for the management of fish stocks. And although we were I don't think our data were recognised as such in the early days. It's now a routine part of fisheries management. Okay, so then finally, I just wanted to say a little bit about natural tags, because although we were doing lots of work using these fancy electronic tags, clearly the amount of information that you can get about a single individual is limited to the memory that you have available in that tag. So when we were tagging place, I was managing to get records back that were a year long. They contained a full seasonal cycle of behavior information for a fish. With our new tags, I've got some nice sea bass that have recorded 2 years of data. But you know, these are potentially longer lived fish, and really we want to get a clearer picture as to whether they're following the same migration routes in successive years. We'd like to understand where the spawning areas for the fish were, where their nursery grounds were, the movements that the juvenile fish were making. And even though tags have got smaller, they still tend to focus on tagging larger, mature individuals. And I became clear at an early stage that I was getting a lot of my tags back being returned with the otoliths of the fish. Now, hopefully now you've got Anna, you probably know lots about otoliths already. Otoliths are the ear stones of the fish. So like any other vertebrate, the otoliths are part of the fish's hearing and balance system. And the thing about otoliths is that they grow sequentially. They have growth rings. So for time immemorial, fisheries scientists have used these rings to age the fish. Recently, however, we've become much more interested in what's inside the rings of the fish, and looking particularly at their chemistry, so that's trace elements and stable isotopes, to see whether we can use these chemical signatures to retrospectively try and reconstruct the lifetime movements of fish. Now, again, I'd love to tell you more about this, but I have no time here to do so. But the answer is that yes, they can, if not tell us definitively, there are lots of clues. It's a challenging but very rewarding field, but there's a lot of current ongoing research, and I'm sure that's probably the subject of another seminar, perhaps. So that's a very brief race between around things that I've been doing. Oh yes, sorry, I did just want to say that anybody who's interested in using otoliths in fish migration research, I suggest a very good starting point is this paper of Anna's from 2012, which really lays out some of the key barriers and problems that we need to address if we're able to use elemental chemistry in a fully marine environment. And there are a range of other papers. Anybody who's interested, do get in touch and we will talk to you at length about that. So, okay, that's a race through my work history, if you like, which I hope some of you may have found inspiring, some of you may have been horrified by, I don't know. The day job now, I would have to say, looks rather different. And like all scientists who reach the higher levels of their organizations, it means a trade-off between the science that you do and the running and management of the science. I'd have to say, I'm still fortunate. I'm supposed to have 1 day per week that I can still use for science, but I'd have to say my science really happens in my own spare time and through the students that I supervise currently. But the day job still provides me with a lot of stimulation in that I'm now chair of the science board. We're responsible for our strategy. We're responsible for strategic investment. And so I work every day with our scientists, looking at how I can help them achieve their best selves and to try and make sure that Cefas is on the right course to meet our sustainability and societal impact objectives. So I think I've probably talked for long enough. So just a couple of comments of summary and reflection. So I hope I've been able to convey today that Cefas is an outward-facing, an international organization with a huge reach, able to make a real difference to people's lives and to help us look for a sustainable blue future. In terms of choosing what you want to do with your career, networks are really important. And if you really want to work with someone, get in touch with them because it can lead to very interesting places. And if you don't do so, you'll never know what you might have had. Then finally, so I've told you about the kind of work that I do at Cefas. Not everybody is out there chasing fish or working in Vanuatu and doing glamorous things. You know, we employ people from a whole range of careers, from project managers right through to those deep specialists who do understand specific areas of marine and aquatic science very thoroughly. But a career in research doesn't need to be constrained to academia. So I'm going to shut up now and say thank you for listening. I should just give a plug now that you can follow Cefas on Twitter. There's loads of information on our website. It's not the best website in the world, but there is a lot of case study information about some of the work that we're currently doing. We do have a newsletter, which is quite an easy read that you can subscribe to. And obviously, I wasn't really able to go into anything in any detail today. So please, if you are interested in any aspects of the research that I've been doing, feel free to drop me an email and I'll now answer any questions that you've got. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ewan. Do you maybe mind taking down your